Good morning, my fellow yogic travelers. I'm mighty glad to be alive today, and I hope that you are too, as we continue to live, laugh, love, learn, linger, and live the life we love. It's Friday, so it's PowerPoint Day. This is called spiritual coma. Uh, our whole culture is in a spiritual coma. In fact, the world is in a spiritual coma. So, can I claim to not be in a spiritual coma, although the world and everybody else is? Well, go in and out. Nonetheless, we chant Om when we practice yoga as a way of attuning ourselves to the vibratory rhythm of the earth. Who knew that the Hertz cycle of earth and the Hertz cycle of Om are the same? But it connects us to lineage, and that's where the transmission happens. Like a lit candle lights an unlit candle, and you pass it on. That's called parampara, the tradition. So first, I like to always critique the idea of enlightenment. I don't know anybody who's enlightened to you. I've had enlightening moments. I've seen people who've had enlightening insights. But you know, when you live with any human being, we're all flawed in some way. We're all vice-ridden in certain ways. We're all off. And of course, in yoga, they say that the ignorance and aggression of our basic way of being before we start to purify ourselves causes a lot of negative karma. So to me, enlightenment, I call it the myth of enlightenment. It's like the pole star. True north doesn't exist south of the equator. You can't see Polaris, right? But north of the equator, its practical and functional effectiveness will be attested to by millions of navigators throughout history. And so the guru's shadow sometimes is the hidden self-interest that many of these spiritual techniques have. But as a magnet to pull the iron filings of your life together, using the idea of enlightenment as a place to navigate the rest of your life, it's a pretty beautiful thing. So I wouldn't suggest that we completely throw the baby out with the bathwater, even though we don't know what real enlightenment is. Anyway, Plato says that we have to reintroduce each other to those constant forms which, through distraction of the senses at birth, we lose touch with. That's called smriti. That means there's a memory that we have of who we really are. And that the biggest job we can do for each other, whether teaching academically or, literally pedagogically, is somehow in our own life to be aware of what that is and help other people be aware of that as well. Now, you got to stay with this for a long time. The path rolls ever on and onward into infinity. So we say short attention span, short horizon. You got to learn to focus and stay with it over long periods of time. Okay, take one idea, make that one idea your life, think of it, dream of it, live on it. Let the brain, muscles, nerves, every part of your body be full of that idea and just leave every other idea alone. This is the way to success. That's ekagrata, one-pointedness. Ram Dass calls it the only dance there is. Nothing can hold a candle to it. Doesn't mean that you're not interested in other things in life, but there's another search engine pulling you. So my teacher always said you have to be a Yanadatta as well as a Karmadatta, a giver of knowledge as well as a giver of action. But it all has to be propelled by bhakti, which is devotion. Now, your therapy is high as your therapist. If you go to Sigmund Freud as your therapist, you're going to learn about your personal unconscious. But if you go to Carl Jung as your therapist, you're going to learn about the individuation process, which you never stop growing into till the day you die. And that'll put you much more in touch with the collective consciousness, the legacy of all humanity that exists in a universal way in each individual. The characteristics of ego strength. This is one of my favorite one-liners. Ego death comes from ego strength, not ego weakness. So you have to build up your ego, otherwise you don't got anything to give up. The ability to accept rejection, not as a personal affront, but as a part of life. The ability to bounce back from rejection, or in other words, to be resilient. The positive attitude of where there's a will, there's a way. Never give up hope. The tendency to see problems as opportunities. Crisis and opportunity is the same word in Chinese. Capacity for seeing small windows of opportunity and making the most of them. Elders find what's useful and what other people find useless. So this is one way of overcoming your own asmita, or ego sense. Now, love yourself enough to honor your pain and know that no one is going to think any less of you because we acknowledge that there's a wounding there. And in that wound, I promise you, buried beneath the shame, the pain, the guilt, the fear of that wound is your power. It's amazing how your vulnerability can turn into like a savior. So if you don't honor your wound, you're going to live a provisional life. And it's not necessarily just to overcome them or erase them, but to somehow take something away, learn something from that. I can't say that every dark cloud has a silver lining, but many more can be reframed into things that actually help you on your path and develop your spiritual powers. Conflict is the beginning of consciousness, say the feminists. And you see, you have two people, right, two ways of looking at things, each one going for their own selfish interest. You can pull as hard as you want. You can try to get away from the opposing forces that demand stuff of you, but in the end, you get stymied. And when you really to confront face to face, you realize there's another better way. You both can share. And then you both can share what each of you has. I think that's a beautiful idea. Vulnerability is no cause for shame. This is what we're saying. The best people possess a feeling for beauty, the courage to take risks, the discipline to take the truth, tell the truth, the capacity for sacrifice. Ironically, their virtues make them vulnerable. They're often wounded and sometimes destroyed by it, says Ernest Hemingway. So how can you learn to turn your vulnerability into a disarming experience for other people and a connection between you and other people through the compassion of human suffering, the poignancy of everybody's plight and predicament? So if you're less than a B plus, I used to tell my college students, ask for a hug. Don't come into the class with that attitude that is less than. So do you know that a 20-second hug can release bonding in the hormone and neurotransmitter called oxytocin, which is nature's antidepressant, anti-anxiety? But you got to hold it 20 seconds. Don't let them go. And then ultimately, each one of us must go forth, as it says in this one. I propose a quest. I propose a vow that we go forth to behold the Grail unveiled. But they thought it would be a disgrace to go forth in a group. So each entered the forest at the point that he himself had chosen, where it was darkest and there was no way or path. That seems to be the beginning of the Western way. It's called Svadharma in yoga, your own path, your own marga, your own way that isn't compared to anybody else and it's completely new. You're not a cookie mold. You haven't been molded like cookie cutter to be exactly like your teacher. But your mentor will give you the blessing as they create a field of visibility for you. So even the yogic path, as beautiful as it is, it's somebody else's path. So how do you learn to, through yoga, improve, learn what success is, learn how to train yourself, learn how to motivate yourself, learn how to work, learn how to be inspired, learn how to aspire? And the way we say you do it is become more aware of the shadow aspects of yourself. At the physical level, it's the back body and the body within, because we see the front body and we feel what's on the outside. So this is the way called Kaya Sadhana, the treasure of the body, Kaya Sampat, the treasure of the body. You're going to learn things about yourself. And of course, since body, mind are one, you're going to learn about yourself psychologically and emotionally. As my teacher says, where does the body end and the mind begin? Where does the mind end and the soul begins? Find out through experience. And then ultimately, you run through what we call the cycles of competence, which is called unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, conscious competence, and unconscious competence. Yoga Kamasu Salam. Yoga is skill in action. So when you start something, they go to your first yoga class, you don't know what's going on. You have no idea that you're incompetent in doing these poses, and you're unconscious of that fact. So even the first class is an upgrade. You come home and they say, what'd you learn in yoga? I'm unconscious and incompetent. But that's an upgrade. Now you're conscious of your incompetence. Unless you start to work on it, you see that after a while, you can control certain things, and you're much more conscious of your competence. But if you keep on working on being consciously competent, at some point it becomes unconscious competence, and you don't have to think about it anymore. You're kind of flowing with the Tao. Have a great day. See you next Wednesday for the yoga into saging, aging into saging. The next